Hello, hello. Welcome to my quick and dirty how to play for the Trails TCG. This is a card game based on the increasingly popular Trails JRPG franchise. It is coming out in English this fall. And in the interest of getting to the point, I'm going to put a bunch of links and information in the description for you to check out. Feel free to ask questions in the comment. I will answer them as best as I can. I do not work for the company or anything like that. I am just a Trails fan and a card games fan. And so I've been taking a look at this. The game looks pretty good. I'm going to get some play it as able, that sort of thing. And I have this small YouTube channel, and TCG Co. was kind enough to send me some demo decks. So I figured I'd go ahead and record a little how to play, and hopefully it helps some people out there that are also interested in this game. So, without further ado, the Trails TCG. This is a unit battling card game. Most of the action is going to revolve around units attacking other units. Both players start the game with 40 bond points, and the goal is to reduce your opponent's bond to 0 or less. You reduce bond primarily by defeating other units, and we'll go into the details of that as we go. So before I get into the card types, I want to get a little bit into the turn structure, and that will help me explain this card types a little bit better, and you'll see why in a minute. But first and foremost, the start of the game. So you start the game not like this. This is a demonstration of a couple of turns in so that we can show some stuff. But you start the game with 4 cards in hand. You draw 4 cards. You can take any number of those and put them on the bottom of your deck and then redraw back up to 4. That is your mulligan. Once both players have done that, you decide who the first player is. Then you go about and get on your way. So onto the turn structure. The turns in this game are shared turns. It is not a, this is my turn, I'm going to do all of my phases, now it's your turn, you're going to do all of your phases. It is one shared turn. Both players are going to go through the phases at more or less the same time. There is a, I do a thing and then you do a thing and then I do a thing and then you do a thing within the phases, but both players are sharing the same overall turn structure. The first phase is called the preparation phase. So in the preparation phase, first the player with initiative, and then the second player is going to do all of their preparation stuff. And there's 3 steps to this. You're going to go ahead and you will draw 2 cards. I don't want to get too much into showing off the hand because we're not going to pay too much attention to those details, but you're going to draw 2 cards, and then you can take up to 1 card from your hand and put it face down in your resource row, which is called the home base in this game. And then, however many cards you have in the base, you're going to get that many craft points. They call that CP. And you don't have to turn these cards sideways to get this. You just get those 3 points, and you can spend those points on these white CP costs, which is pretty much on units, and the second card type called items. So you can spend up to 3 points, in this case, because you have 3 cards in your base, deploying units with a total of 3 costs or less. So we could just deploy this 1 and call it a day. We could deploy this 3. If we had a 2 and a 1, we could deploy a 2 and a 1. We could deploy 3 1s. We could do nothing. But you have up to 3 points to use. You don't get to save them afterwards. You just get those 3 points. You spend them how you will. And then once one player has done that, the other player goes ahead and does the same thing. They will draw 2 cards. They will put 1 face down, and then they will spend up to 3 CP deploying units. So with that background, let's talk about the card types themselves. So the first one, obviously, is units. These are going to be kind of the bread and butter of the game. This is going to be what you're fighting with. You can see each unit is going to have a CP cost. It's how much you need to put it out. It's going to have a strength and a defense stat. It's going to have a faction, which is pretty important. This deck is built around the Crossbell Police Department faction. This other deck is built around the Bracer Guild. And they may have some kinds of abilities or effects. This one has a little arrow symbol down, which means when you deploy it, you draw a card. For another example, we have Joshua Bright here, who's a 2-cost 3/2. And if you have an Estelle Bright, he gets 1/1. He gets to be a 4/3. So those are a couple types of example units. The second card type is called an event. Here's an example event here. And you'll notice that these do not have that white CP cost. These have an EP cost. I can't get it into focus here. There we go. And these are the cards that you turn base cards sideways for. Turning cards sideways in this game is called actioning them. So if you want to play this, you could play it from your hand. You would action 2 cards in your base to get your 2 EP. And then you would play this, you would get the effect, and it would go into your discard pile, which in this game is called the Trail. Now, interesting thing about this game is you can play events like this from your hand, but you can also play them from your base. So if you have an event in your base like this, you can pay your 2 EP, and then reveal the card from your base, just turn it face up, you get the effect, and it does not get discarded. It stays in your base, so you can continue to use it to generate EP and to get CP and so on and so forth. The effect doesn't do anything anymore. It's still just a one-shot effect, but you've gotten to preserve a card because instead of throwing a card in your hand away, you've just turned a card in your base face up and you've still gotten that effect. Now, you'll notice that some units have these abilities on them that have that blue and gold circle on them. These are called arts. And if a unit has an art, then you get to use this card either as a unit, right? You use the CP, you deploy it, it does fighting, or you can use it as an art. You can play it from your hand for 2 EP or play it from your base for 2 EP to get that one-shot effect. Now, it is an either-or situation. You're never going to get both. If you deploy the unit, you're not going to get to use its art. If you use it as an art, from your base or whatever, it's never going to be a unit. But it makes some units more flexible, and, especially like a cheap one-drop like this that might not be so useful later in the game, well, you can put it face down and use it for an art, for instance. So those are units and arts and events. And the third actual card type is called bases. Now bases, as you might imagine, do stuff while they're in your base. They have this green hexagon cost. And that is a level cost, and your level is just how many cards you have in your base. Once you have at least that many cards, you can just turn the base face up. Some bases do stuff when they're flipped, some bases give you ongoing effects, like this gives you this activated ability to action it to get this plan 1 effect. So even right now, right, this player could just turn this face up here. Now the fourth card type, which is not shown here because there aren't any in these trial decks, is called items. Items have a CP cost just like units. They come out onto your field and then they just kind of hang out and do something or give you some kind of effect. So, and that's it. That's the 4 card types. Pretty straightforward. Bases are the only ones that will do something when they're face up, in your home base. Anything else that's face up in your home base is just face up because you've used it already and can't use it again. And notably, a lot of this stuff can be done at any time. So obviously you deploy units during the preparation phase, but you can action a card for EP at any time. You can play an event at any time. You can turn a base face up at any time. You can use an activated ability on a base or on some other card at any time. And the other thing that you can do at any time is called scrum supporting, which we'll get into later. Now, if you've played some card games before, obviously there's going to be some kind of formal definition about what exactly at any time means. They do have a pretty comprehensive looking rulebook in Japanese that I assume will be in English at some point. So I don't know the exact definition of at any time, but it's not going to be literally at any time, just for purposes of learning the game and trying it out. Just kind of figure at any time, within the bounds that make any sense at all, right? So with the card types out of the way, we've done our preparation phase. Let's just say, we're not going to play out this turn. We're going to play out a turn 3 scenario. But we've moved on to the combat phase. Now in the combat phase, players are going to take turns declaring attacks. You don't have to attack, you can pass, and if both players pass, then you're done with the combat. To attack, the most basic form of attack is I pick a unit and I attack one of your other units. So say, I took this Fran and said, I'm going to go ahead and attack your Estelle. When you attack, you action the unit you're attacking with, and then you would go ahead and compare the strength and defense of the 2 units that are fighting. If the strength of a unit is greater than or equal to the defense of the other unit, the unit that's gotten beaten will get stunned. They do not get killed, they get stunned. In this case, both these units are going to stun each other because they're both 2/2s. When a unit gets stunned, you turn it face down and action it. And whenever a unit gets stunned, the player who owns the unit loses their CP worth of bond. So in this case, this would not be a super compelling attack because I send my 2 CP unit into this Estelle. They both stun each other. I lose 2, the opponent loses 1. But maybe I want to take Estelle away so that Joshua gets powered down or something like that, right? Or for instance, if it was on the other foot, the Liberal player, the Bracer Guild player, could send Joshua at Fran. And now we have a 4/3 Joshua because of his effect to the 2/2. Only Fran is going to get stunned. The Crossbell player will lose 2, and Joshua's still hanging around. Now, this is not a game where damage gets dealt. There's no 2 damage floating on Josh or anything like that. You're just comparing strength to defense and strength to defense back and forth. So it's not like I can turn around and take out Josh with this Crossbell Police Department card. It wouldn't work. It'd still be a 2/2. It'd still lose the 4/3. The other thing that happens in a standard attack is if you beat a unit by more than their defense, so this is a 4-2 situation, you can cause overkill damage to the opponent's bond. So not only would the crossbow player lose 2 because Fran's getting stunned, they'd also lose 2 because 2 is the amount of overkill that we had for Joshua's 4 beating Fran's 2. Now, you can prevent overkill by doing what's called a scrum support. It's called SCLM in the rulebook. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be pronounced scrum. To do a scrum support, you take a unit of the same faction, and you can action them to give a character what's called the support effect. If a character has support, they don't get overkilled. So if the Bracer Guild player made this attack and sent Joshua at Fran, the crossbow player would have to decide, do I want to take the extra 2 overkill, or do I want to give Fran support, and now I won't be able to attack with this unit anymore because I just actioned it, but I'll save a couple of bond in the process. They would have to make that decision. There are some effects that give card support, like this police unit itself gives itself support whenever it's actioned, which is kind of neat. So there are some effects that do it, but the most common way to get support is going to be to do this scrum support, which again, you can do at any time. You know, if for instance, they're making this attack and we didn't want to give support to Fran, but for whatever reason, we want to go ahead and give support to the police unit, we could say, okay, well, we're going to give support to this on our way out, and then Fran's going to get stunned. So that's your basic one-on-one attack. The other type of attack you can do is called a scrum attack, as opposed to a scrum support, and that means you can take any number of units with the same faction, factions are a very big deal in this game, and have them attack together. So we could say, okay, these 2 are both going to attack Joshua, and now we have made a 4-4, because we have 2 2-2s here, and now we have a 4-4 against a 4-3. So now Joshua's going to get stunned, because 4 beats the 3, but there's no overkill on a scrum attack. You cannot take a board of 5 guys, send them at one enemy, and get like 10 overkill damage. That doesn't happen. Once you're scrum attacking, there is no overkill, but it is a good way to take multiple smaller units and take out a bigger one. So in this case, the 4 would beat the 3, and the Bracer Guild player would have to pick one of the attacking units to compare their stats against. So in this case, we probably pick the one that has 2 CP so that Fran gets stunned, and the crossbow player loses 2 bond, the Bracer Guild player loses 2 bond, and then the Bracer Guild player would have a turn to attack, and they could decide if they want to make this trade or not, because these are both 2-2s. So that's normal attacking and scrum attacking. Now, if you have a situation where, for one reason or another, the opponent's entire board is stunned out, and there's nothing legal to attack, you can't attack any units, there's nothing here to attack, you can send a unit directly at your opponent, and they'll just lose its strength in bond. This happens most often with a keyword called Covert that is featured in this cross-spell deck, but I'm not involving in this demo. That kind of plays around with attack targeting. But long and short of it is if you cannot legally attack a unit, that unit can attack the player. And that's combat. You go back and forth on this until both players pass, and then you move on to the last phase, which is the cure phase, which is kind of the cleanup phase of the turn. At the start of the cure phase, you check for the winner. That is to say, the game does not end when somebody hits 0 bond. That is not the end of the game. It does not end on the spot like most card games do. The game doesn't end until the start of the cure phase. So at the start of the cure phase, you see if one player is at or below 0 bond and the other one's above it. If so, then the player that still has bond left is the winner. If they're both below 0, then whoever is further below 0 is the loser. So it's not just a matter of, okay, I got the initiative, I'm going to start this turn, I'm going to put my opponent to 0, GG, game's over. You still have to play out that turn and try to make sure that they're still lower than you at the end of all of this, which is a very interesting dynamic and pretty appealing, compared to some other games kind of have a problem with this. You're going to play out the whole turn no matter what, see who's lower. The player who has taken the least overkill into their bond ends up being the winner. If they are tied, whoever was second for that turn is the one that wins. If not, if there is no winner, if both players are fully healthy, they have plenty of bond, or they all both at least have 1 bond, then you go to the cure step, where each player is allowed to cure up to 1 stunned unit. So say it was like this, the Bracer Guild player gets to go ahead and heal their stunned Joshua. The crossbow player would have to pick one of these 2 to heal. Say they want to heal the police officer, because it's a 2-2 with less of a CP burden, and the other one gets discarded to the trail. So as the game goes on, the boards tend to grow because you have to stun more than 1 unit to actually take something away. So things tend to stay pretty populated in terms of board-wise. Usually you end up having 3 to 5 units on the board at any given time once you get into the game. Sometimes they get really wide. Somebody just like draws some cards and plays a bunch of 2-drops or something like that. So you do your cure your 1 stun unit, you discard any other remaining stun units, and then you ready all your cards. Everything that is action, you go ahead and ready it. You pass the initiative, and then you go to the next turn. And then you go through prepare phase, combat phase, cure phase, over and over again, building up, you know, your capacity to play things and do stuff, and the game goes on until somebody has won. And that is the shortest version that I could cook up of how to play the Trails TCG. So we're going to go through an example turn here. Again, I'll have a link to the full quick rules in the comments. There's some details I'm leaving out here that aren't major and aren't like part of the core fabric of the game, and you can look at some of the cards and that sort of thing. But let's say, for instance, we are now going into a turn 3 situation, and all of these characters are up, and, you know, through one way or another, this has ended up being the board state going into this turn. So the Bracer Guild player has the first go at this. They have a few options in their hand already, right? They can play this 3-drop. They'll be able to play 2 1-drops if they want. We're going to draw 2 cards, and we're going to get a nice 3-cost base, which is cool. A 5-drop we can't play yet, but pretty straightforward, unless we want to use one of these arts, which we might, and I'm not going to go through the text of every card here. This is it. We're just going to go ahead and put this 3-cost base down. That goes face down into our home base row, and now we're going to get 3 CP to spend. So again, we could play the 3, we could play 2 1s, but hey, we can turn bases face up at any time, so we're going to go ahead and do it. And this one lets us reveal the top card of our deck, and we can put any Bracer Guild we revealed into our hand. Now, I have to action this to do it, which means I'm not going to be able to use that for EP later, but this card is a dud. It's not doing anything here, so we're not afraid to go ahead and do this. So we'll do this, we'll reveal the top card. It's a 4-drop. It is a Bracer Guild unit, like all the units in this deck are, so it will go to my hand, but it's not going to help me. So let's say instead of playing the 2 1-drops, we are going to go ahead and deploy a gate here. And a gate is a 3/4 that notably gets, come on, focus. He gets +2/+2 while he's attacking, which is not going to come into focus here, but he's a 3/4. If he attacks, he'll be a 5/6. So that is what the Bracer Guild is putting on the table. And now the Crossbell player, who is going second but got to see all of this, can decide what they're doing based on what they know the Bracer Guild players put out. So they have a hand with some more options in it. We have a couple different 3 costs we could choose. We could play a 2 and a 1. And, you know, this is obviously pre-planned here, so we've stacked the decks a little bit to set this up. And once again, we drew a base 2. Now, we could put that face down, but we're looking at the board, and we've decided that we actually want to put this Tio face down. Because this Tio has a craft that will an art that will let us action a unit with a CP cost 3 or less. Now we're looking at going second here, and we're looking at these board states, and their units are just bigger than ours. So I feel like we're going to want to use a trick to get through this round as cleanly as we can. So we're going to go ahead and put Tio down here, and then again, you can use, you know, events and arts at any time. So we're just going to go ahead and pay our 3 EP and turn her face up, and we're just going to action this agate and get him out of the picture, and then we're going to deploy our 3-drop Randy, who gets +2/+0 when he's attacking. He's a 4/4. You can see that dispatchability on there. You can read the quick rules for details on that. It lets you play things from your base if a unit has the dispatchability, which is kind of cool. So now we've both gone through our preparations phase. The Crossbell player has used their going second status to try to give themselves an advantageous position to the extent that they can. But the Bracer Guild player is going to get the first attack. So they're looking at this, and they know that this Randy's going to come in as a 6/4 if it gets to attack. So we're just going to try to get that out of here first. We're going to do a single attack of Joshua against the Randy. There's no combat tricks that are going to happen here because we've both kind of used all our stuff. So we're going to send 4/3 at 4/4. They will both get stunned. The 4 is bigger than the 3. The 4 is equal to the 4. And the Bracer Guild player will lose 2 bond, and the Crossbell player will lose 3 bond. And then it's the Crossbell player's turn to attack. So now they don't have their Randy, they don't have their 6/4 to send at a guy. But, you know, we'll bring him back. We'll probably be curing him regardless here, right? And so we have some options. We could trade off for this Estelle, or we can scrum attack at the gate, who is just a 3/4. So we have 2/2/2s. We go ahead and scrum attack at the gate, and we have 4/4 against 3/4, so now the gate's going to get stunned. and the Bracer Guild loses 3 bond, and they're going to choose to stun Fran, of course, so that the crossbow player loses 2 bond. So we've done a normal attack, and we've done a scrum attack, and now, once again, the Bracer Guild player here could make this trade. What we're actually going to do here is, because we know that Randy's probably coming back, we're actually going to take Joshua back instead of a gate. So we want this Estelle here to buff Joshua, so we're not going to make this attack. And we can't go face, right? There's a legal target to attack, so even if everything's sideways, this isn't like card games that have blocking in them or something, you cannot attack the player directly unless there is nothing you can legally attack. So this Estelle just kind of has to hang out here. The Bracer Guild player passes, the Crossbow player passes. We go to the cure step, and as described, we're going to choose to keep Joshua over here and lose the Agate, and we're going to keep Randy over here and lose the Fran, and then everything readies up. And then we pass initiative, and then we go to the next turn. So that's a quick example, sort of third turn scenario. You can imagine the board states can get pretty gnarly. It gets pretty chessy in this game, but even, you know, that early board state, there was a bunch of decisions to be made. You know, we didn't look at every card in the hand. There was a bunch of different options that we didn't go with here. But yeah, hope that has been a helpful way to sort of quickly explain the Trails TCG to you. Once again, ask any questions in the comment and I'll answer them as best as I can. Check the description for a bunch of other details, and if I missed anything, I'll put them in the top comment or in the description or something. We'll figure that out after the fact. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good one.